Hi there and welcome to a new tutorial video on the Korg Electribes. Today I want to talk a little bit about the MIDI and audio signal flow in both of these machines. And maybe first of all to give you a little definition about what MIDI is and what audio is. MIDI data cannot really be listened to. MIDI data is merely controller data that has to be sent to an instrument, which then puts this information into sound, basically. So there's no way to listen to a MIDI file by itself without sending it somewhere to make it sound. Audio data is pretty much the opposite. Audio data does not control any controller, contain any controller information. Audio data is really the sound itself that you can listen to. Okay, and maybe I should explain to you how I set everything up in this case. I plugged my microphone into the audio in on the Korg EMX, which is a mono in and can be switched from line to mic signal. Of course, I switched it to mic signal to give it a little extra amplification. And the line output left and right of the Korg EMX is plugged into the audio in on the Korg ESX, and here I have the choice between stereo or mono signal and can also use line or mic signal. This is set to line signal because the line output of the Korg EMX is put into it, right? And maybe just, I don't know if you can see this, I have this cable here, and I've learned that you should always use red, the color red, when you have a black and red combination cable, red for the right side. It both starts with an R, so that's something that is easy to remember. Red for the right, black or white for the left. But this cable doesn't work this way. This is because this is just one plug. That means that you cannot switch either way, and so in this case I have to put the red side to the left because the cable is made this way. Okay, that's just something that is about this cable that doesn't really matter. I have the microphone, the headphones output plugged into my camera directly. So I could have also used the line left and right output here. That doesn't really make that much of a difference. I don't need a mixer in this case because this is just one single audio signal path. And I have activated the audio in through buttons on both machines because I just want the audio signal to run through the machine. I don't want to manipulate the audio signal by using the effects or other settings. If I wanted to do that, I'd have to choose a synth part on the EMX, choose audio in, which is always combined with a comb filter, and then press a key down for as long as I want the audio in signal to sound, and then I could manipulate the sound using the knobs and everything. And it's the same thing on the ESX, except here we have a dedicated audio in part, which will also only sound if I either keep the button pressed or if I keep a key on the keyboard pressed at for the time that I want the audio in signal to sound, and then I can manipulate it. Okay, so much for the audio signal path. Now let's talk about MIDI. MIDI gets a bit more complicated than that. The problem that most people have with MIDI connections is that too much data is transmitted or received. I hooked up the MIDI out of the EMX to the MIDI in jack of the ESX, So I want to use the EMX as a master and the ESX as a slave. And all I want to do basically is MIDI sync. I want them both to start at the same time when I press play. I want them both to stop at the same time when I press stop. But I want these two machines to use their individual sequences and tracks that I have programmed on the machines to run at the same speed. And that's all I want. I don't want to transmit note values. If I press a key on the EMX, I just want the sound of the EMX to sound and not the both of them together like it is happening now. I don't want, whenever I turn, for example, the panning knob on the EMX, to manipulate the sound of the ESX as well, which is something that is also happening in the default setting, like so. Okay, I turn the pan to the right, and also the sound of the ESX on the same track will be put to the right. I don't want that. And also, I don't want node changes to be transmitted. I don't want controller changes to be transmitted. And okay, so how do I avoid that? On the EMX and on the ESX, there is something called MIDI utility. And in order to change these settings, the default settings, you have to be on global mode or on MIDI mode on the Korg EMX. On the ESX, you have to be in global mode. Alright, so I push the global button on the EMX. I'll hold down Shift and press key number 12. And now the display says MIDI utility filter and the key starts blinking. So I confirm. Now I see PCEN in the display with the letter O written beneath these letters. So O means that all this data is transmitted and received. P stands for program changes. C is for control changes. E is for system exclusive data. And N is for node changes. And as I said, O means that this is transmitted and received. And the only thing I want to transmit from the master to the slave is system exclusive data, because that's where the MIDI clock is. And so I turn the dial to the left until I have an X underneath all the letters except for the letter E. I confirm the setting by pressing the blinking key again. And now I have the master set so that only MIDI clock data is transmitted. I can now press a key on the keyboard and I only hear the sound of the EMX. I can also make knob changes, turn a knob like I just did with a pan, and since I only hear the EMX anyway, you cannot hear a change on the ESX, of course, but that's because I put the X underneath the letter C for control changes in the MIDI filter. Now, when I press play though, I still have the problem that the ESX doesn't start along, right? Because I have to add a change to the MIDI clock. By default, the MIDI clock is set to internal. And that is okay for the master because I want to use the master's tempo for the MIDI setup. In this case, I have 160 BPM dialed in. But on the ESX, when I have the clock set to internal, it doesn't accept the MIDI start message. So I have to set the MIDI clock on the ESX to external now. And now it's waiting for the MIDI clock to be received by the MIDI in. And now when I press play, I I have both machines start at the same time when I press play on the master device. Alright? And now if I want to keep this change as a default, even after I switch the machine off and then on again, I have to do a global write so that these settings that I just dialed in are there every time that I switch on the machine. So I go to global write, press write. The display asks me if I want to save these settings as a global write. Yes, I say yes, confirm. And now even if I switch the machine off and on again, these settings stay as they are. And I'll do the same on the ESX. Global write, I say yes. Okay. And if I wanted to, I could even now use the ESX to send out MIDI data, because here on the MIDI filter, I still have everything activated, but since the master only sends out MIDI exclusive data, of course that's all that is received by the ESX. It can still be used to send out note messages for another machine, right? Okay, and by the way, part mute settings or solo settings are not transmitted by MIDI no matter what setting you choose for the MIDI filter. That's something that always stays internally, that always affects the machine itself, which is also something quite useful, I think. Alright, so I hope that was interesting to you. I have a song set up which works in a MIDI setup for these two machines, but I'm going to post that a little later to let you hear what these two machines sound in sync, what they sound like when they are put in sync. Thanks a lot for watching and see you next time. Bye.